Oke, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Aulia Olivia El Paradila, and today I'd like to talk about language and thought and language processing. Okay, next, I will talk about with an idea about language and thought. Okay, uh, we may have had the experience that while we are thinking about something or planning an activity, we have a voice in our brain, right? That sounds very like to our own voice and talks to us about whatever we are thinking about. This inner monologue is so typical when you are thinking that you could think talking to yourself and thinking is the same thing. If you believe this was how cognition worked, you would be in excellent company, as famous behaviorist G.B. Watson and B.F. Skinner both promote variants of this theory. Again, next, Watson's theories of language and mind met its conclusion in 1947 when medical professionals in Salt Lake City tied a healthy 34-year-old research volunteer to a stretcher and injected him with Curare from Smith, Brown, Thoman, and Goodman, 1947. It is fully paralyzed the muscles of the body, including the throat muscles, which Watson felt were essential for cognitive processes. Okay, the research participant lost his capacity to talk 4 minutes after the Curare injection because his throat muscle could no longer move. It couldn't move. Despite his inability to communicate, the volunteer was nevertheless aware of everything going on around him. As he recovered, the volunteer stated that he was clear as bell during his paralysis. And furthermore, while unable to speak, the volunteer responded yes or no questions by manipulating muscles that had not yet become entirely paralyzed, such as his eyebrow, his eyelid muscles. His response to these questions were entirely correct. Smith's research the Smith's research team, conclude that deactivating the speech muscles had no effects on the volunteer's ability to perceive, think about, or remember the events that occurred during total muscular paralysis based on the events during the experiments and the volunteer's subsequent description of his experience. The accurate results are fatal to Watson's theory that thinking and moving the neck muscles, whether openly or covertly, are the same thing. Yet, he may still be correct if talking to oneself without moving any muscles is the same thing as thinking. Again, next about verb theory of linguistic determinism. Okay, Verb and his linguistics advisor, Edward Sapir, proposed that the language we speak impacts how we think. Their theory is known by several names, but we'll call it linguistic determinism to emphasize the concept that language drives mind, that the way we think is dictated by the language we use. An examination of Eskimo language vocabulary was one of Verb's primary motives for developing linguistic determinism. Verb may have reasoned, based on Franz Boas' 1911 examination of Eskimo, that where English has a single term for snow, Eskimo languages have numerous words. Okay, why does, next please. Why does Eskimo have so many words, whereas English just has one? Okay, a word content that Eskimos had more words for snow because they divided the notion snow into several unique subconceptions, each with its own term. They would do this for the same reason that you would give each of your children a different name if you had more than one. So you see them as distinct persons, and it would be unimaginable to refer to them all by the same name, right? So yet linguistics determinism implies much more. It states that if your language contains numerous terms for snow, you will be able to distinguish between different types of snow that those whose language lacks those distinctions will not be able to see. The example, because you speak Eskimo, you see a wider variety of snow. Since I speak English, I am unable to recognize the distinctions that you see. Okay, next, talk about general outline of mental process on how language is perceived and understood. Okay, next, basic visual processing occurs in the visual cortex. More complex visual processing occurs in other brain locations. Okay, computationally autonomous indicates that a mental processing mechanism operates independently of what is going on in other processing processes. This feature sometimes goes by the name encap- encapsulations. While there are significant disagreements about the extent to which language processing meets Fodor's conditions, treating different aspects of language processing as if they were independent, um, modular processes aid in breaking down a massively complex system into more manageable chunks. Just keep in mind that the whole system needs to work together in a coordinated fashion to produce and understand language. Okay, next. The production system begins with conceptual knowledge and culminates with a collection of speech sounds. Okay, the first potential production system subcomponent is a series of mechanisms that uses active conceptual information to activate associated word knowledge in the mental lexical. After a collection of candidate word representations has been activated, they must be arranged in a precise sequence. While conceptual knowledge is not linear, speech is since you can only say one word at a time. Word must be inflected after they have been put in a certain sequence. That is, they must be given the correct phonological form. The beginning with a collection of speech sounds such as phonemes, syllables, and words, the understanding system maps them to a set of ideas or meanings. As with production, it is important to break down the comprehension process into pieces and examine each one independently as if it were a module. That even the components of comprehensions may not fit Fodor's description of modules. And while comprehension and production are generally considered as separate issues, when we are engaged in language processing, we are often attempting to understand what someone is saying while also preparing what we will say next. While in reality, the majority of our language intake occurs during conversation. Okay, I think that's all for me about the language and thought and language processing. Okay, thank you so much for the attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.